Right, now we're actually going quite nicely on time because this is our final section, so we might even have a little bit of time for questions and the like at the end. JADE examples. So these are examples of JADE code that we basically we provide in the hopes that they might be informative and useful. We've provided examples of JADE for quite some time, but generally what we do is we put them all sorts of different places, and it's often quite hard to find them. I don't know if anyone's tried to get the Euroone system off the website. It's a bit of a mission to find where it is, and there's, I think, different places that it lives. The idea being that we just kind of want to make that process a little bit more awesome. So, 3 things that we've kind of got coming in this section. First of all, you've seen the public GitHub repositories. We looked at the ATCG. ATCG lives on the public GitHub. The other one is when I did the Git client demo. We also grabbed Euroone off the public GitHub. So we'll look at what changes we made around that. We've also done a little bit of an update to the Euroone demonstration system. And finally, the JADE developers course, which by the way, there's one coming up, more about that later. We've done quite a lot of extensions to that JADE developers course. We've got a whole lot of supplementary topics that are going to be really useful for when you're bringing junior developers on board to, go a little bit further in getting everyone up to speed. So, public GitHub repositories. So, JADE Software NZ is the name of GitHub, and in it we have a whole lot of repositories of all sorts of useful things. The idea being, going forwards, this is going to be our primary way of delivering JADE examples. So anytime, say a white paper references a JADE schema, if there's updates to the Euroone system, if you're wanting any sort of JADE example schema, this is where we want to be looking for it. So we've got Euroone on here. We've got that banking system is the model answer for the banking system that you developed during the JADE developers course. So if anyone is doing the JADE developers course and wants to cheat, that's where the model answer is. We've also got, for those of you who are at the JUG, would have seen just a little demo app that has a bit of a prototype of connecting to Google Analytics. So that demonstration app lives on there as well. The ATCG schemas, again, they live on there. As I said, white papers, some of the white papers reference examples. So the XML white paper has an example schema to go with it. That's where that lives now as well. And yeah, moving forward, this is where we're going to put everything. Now, speaking of Euroone, probably many of you are familiar with the Euroone demonstration system, but for anyone who isn't, it's basically a pretend e-commerce platform where agents post high-end, one-of-a-kind items for auction. Now, the idea of the Euroone demonstration system is it's kind of one of everything. So we're trying to have pretty much every feature that we can cram into one system, just so you can kind of get a little bit of an idea of how it looks. It's not completely exhaustive. We don't have literally every JADE feature in it, but there are a lot of JADE features in the demonstration system. And we made just a couple of improvements for the 2018 release for it. First of all, a little bit of an update to some of the UIs. Not big updates, just a little bit of polish around the edges. One thing is the .NET exposures. We now have a front end done in WPF from .NET. So if you want to get a bit of an idea of how it works having a JADE database backend with a C# front end, then you've got an example there. One thing is code quality improvements. Now, while we don't prescribe any particular coding style, we do try and keep things looking a bit nice. So, we've just made a couple of little changes around that. And we've incorporated some new JADE 2018 features. Well, one in particular, which is we now use the new create with parameters rather than the old create style, so that you can kind of have a bit of a nosy at how that looks. And the big one as well is for unit testing. previously the Euroone system didn't have any unit tests at all. Now it's got lots of unit tests, so you can actually get an idea of not only JADE development, but also the testing part of JADE development, and have a look at how you would use a JADE test case class. Cool. So first up, the updated web and JADE Forms UIs. Again, it's many small changes we're looking at. We haven't completely changed the layout or anything like that. What we've done is just made things a little bit better. So we've got a mixture of bug fixes, usability improvements, and new features, just to kind of modernise things a little bit. Lots and lots and lots of changes. I'm actually just going to go through kind of one of each. So one example of a bug fix is previously, if you type the wrong thing in one of the text boxes, you start getting these exception error boxes. So theoretically, you shouldn't be able to get these exceptions anymore, because we actually did the validation as you're typing and stop you from putting in values that aren't going to be reasonable. So yep, we've done that. In terms of things like usability, many little usability improvements. One was to do with this weird little button here that behaved very bizarrely. But the one I wanted to just talk about here is previously you'd buy an item and it would stay on the page even though the item's already bought, and you try and buy it again, you get an error. Now it just behaves a little bit better. Once you buy the item, it actually goes back to the menu. Again, it's not a big thing, but there's just lots of little things like that we want to let you know about. The best way is if you pull up the Euroone system, you can actually have a look at all of the things it does. And in terms of features, again, lots of little features. We mentioned that in the application browser, you can click on a column heading and sort by that column. Well, might as well, as we're doing that, we'll also put that in Euroone. So you can also do the same thing with Euroone. You just click on any column heading. So for instance, this one I've done sort by name. This one I've sorted by date sold. You can sort by any category with any of the column headings. Sorry, pardon me. Next one along was, as I mentioned, we made a WPF .NET front end. So this uses the C# exposures feature. It's pretty much identical to the classic JADE Forms front end that was made in the JADE Painter, but it's just made in WPF instead, and then it just does everything through a C# exposure. And really, it's just providing an example of how you can use JADE database backend with other technologies in the front end. For this one, we're just going to do a little bit of a demo, just to kind of see what you can do in the shop, basically just so you can see that it does work. Now, where's my Euroone demo at? One demo. Now, do I have my wrap open? So one thing is you'll need to have a wrap open. Okay, I did already have a wrap open. That's good. And once you've got the wrap open, it just works essentially like a FAT client. So this is just a batch file that opens up the executable. Oh, sorry, it's gone on my laptop screen. I'll just move it over. That's essentially what it looks like. You'll note that looks pretty much like the painter's starting form. You can select who you want to be. Oh, of course, it's going to move over to my laptop screen every time, isn't it? That's a bit awkward. So I might, for instance, want to look at all of the items that come from New Zealand. It's going to show them up there. I can click in any of those and go details. And then, of course, it's going to show up on my laptop screen, so I'll move it over. And then I can buy it. Cool, and it's added to my cart. And then I can go to the checkout, which, of course, is going to pop up on my laptop screen, so I'll bring it over. And then I could either select it and remove it, or I could empty the cart. I might as well, what should I do? I'll proceed. Oops, right, the wrong button, didn't I? Oh, no, I didn't. Confirmation. Continue. Cool, so I bought an item. What retail items do I have? Oh yeah, let's get a colonial house for $4.5 million. Let's buy that too while I'm at it. Oh yeah, I'll drag that over. Actually no, maybe I don't want to spend $4.5 million on a colonial house. I'll just remove that. Okay, I'll remove from the cart and can go back, and yeah, we've got a front end, and that's all just WPF there. So the idea being that we've got this kind of model view pattern used in Euroone. We have one model, we have a whole bunch of different views. We've got the view you just saw made in WPF. We've got a full JADE Painter, one made the JADE Painter, which is JADE Forms. We've also got like a web-based form, a couple other ones as well. Cool. Now what are we like on time? Good. So probably a lot of you are pretty experienced developers. You might be wondering what the benefit for Euroone is. What I'd suggest is that if you're onboarding a new developer, a really good thing to do, like first thing for developers, have a bit of a look at the Euroone system. Gives you a really good kind of big picture of JADE, of all of the different little things that you can do. Now in terms of code quality, for the next thing, so as I mentioned before, the intent of Euroone is to provide examples of JADE code that just covers as many as possible of JADE's features. Again, we haven't quite got all of them, and we're adding more all of the time, but we've got most of them. Now, it's not necessarily going to be a prescription of coding style, but at the same time, we do want things to be, not too yucky. So we've just made a couple of improvements. So one improvement is the good old if, else if, else if, else if, else if, else if, else if block. Generally, whenever you see a million else ifs like this, there's probably a better way of doing things. So that was in the previous version of Euroone. You can actually just, because we're just dealing with translatable strings here, you can actually just do a count locale.get string value and do the lookup. So this is just an example. If you actually just use the feature, you can save yourself a lot of typing. So next one is, I mentioned before in the refactoring, the old magic number hunt. So there was actually quite a few magic numbers in Euroone. And personally, I don't like magic numbers. There are now no magic numbers in Euroone. Now, any sort of number will represent what it actually is. So for instance, if it's the modal result, that's 1. We know that's for an OK. So that will now be called modal OK. Cool. Next thing along is the new features. Now, in terms of 2018 features in Euroone, there's not actually heaps of them. The main one is that we use create with parameters. So all of the creates now use create with parameters. But I've got some kind of extras just to kind of pad things out a bit. I hope you'll forgive me for that. So we're also going to count the fact that it's on the JADE Software New Zealand GitHub, and it does use the new DDX format. So if you're grabbing Euroone, you can grab Euroone using the new JADE Git client from the new JADE Software NZ GitHub, as I did in my little demo, and that will grab you your 2018 version of Euroone. I'll also note, because we're using new create with parameters features, this new Euroone version, it is only compatible with JADE 2018. It is the 2018 version of Euroone.
Just a quick question about your example there.
What is my example there?
With the create.
Oh, yeah.
So anyone sort of onboarding might ask the question why you can't do a return directly without using a variable?
Oh, yeah, you definitely can. Essentially, there's a few cases of this where we're just a little bit more verbose in Euroone to kind of, make it clear, giving you an example of the syntax, right? Because I could, as you say, I could just go return. No, wait, I can't return. No, maybe I could.
You can't.
But essentially, what you want to do is you want to have an example of the new parameterized constructor example. So what I do is we have this variable client. You set the client to the create, and that just makes it a lot more clear than if you just directly return create client. I don't know. I would find that less readable. Maybe a better way of putting that is, yeah.
Yeah, there are issues with the JADE language and the grammar, and it would have we tailored it specifically for an assignment statement until we can work out a way of extending it to, for example, you mentioned there return the create directly. Another example is putting the new syntax create into the parameter to a method call. And there are ambiguities in the language which are rather complicated. So we've taken the approach, we're limited currently to an assignment statement to provide the mechanism to do it, and we'll look at trying to address the language side of things.
Cool, thanks for that. I think there was some reason I did it that way. Cool. Yep. Yeah, so it looks like, so you can't go return directly on the create. I'd also argue, I think that looks more beautiful. Maybe it's less performance though. But yeah. Now, the next one was the unit tests. So previously there were no unit tests for Euroone. There was a couple of JADE scripts that did a little bit of testing, but there was no use of the JADE test case. Now we do have a test suite for it. So it's 697 assert statements across 285 test cases. No test suite is exhaustive. This one is pretty decent though. And it uses things like the new, it's not new, but it has proper use of unit test before all, unit test after all, unit test before, unit test after to establish the the preconditions before each test and establish the post-conditions after each test to make sure that everything works and it doesn't actually matter what order you run the tests in and all of that good stuff, to make sure the end state's the beginning, same as the beginning state. So again, if you've got maybe you've got a brand new tester on board, you could give them the Euroone system just to kind of see how JADE test case unit test work. Cool. Now, last thing, and this is one which I think is particularly cool, JADE Developers course. Now, some of you have probably done the JADE Developers course. Hopefully all of you are familiar with it. The JADE Developers course is a 5-day course designed for people that are very new to JADE. So generally the idea is someone who is maybe familiar with programming in general but hasn't used JADE before. It's a 5-day course that kind of gets you up to speed so you can really get started doing JADE development. Now, it was always kind of put really at that junior level. There's been some demand for, well, can we have a little bit more of an intermediate course? And so the kind of the solution we're looking around with that is we'll keep the JADE Developers course at the very base level junior course, and then we've got some extension topics that will kind of extend out more in towards the like the intermediate sort of level. So we'll talk about those supplementary topics. What we want to cover is, first of all, what are they? Who are they for? Where can you find them? When will they be released? And how many are there? So, first of all, what are they? As I say, they're extensions. They're supplementary. They're like the JADE Developers course, but more. They're presented in the exact same format as the JADE Developers course modules. So you have that kind of that explanation of the the feature or the part of JADE that you're looking at, and then you have some exercises, and the exercise will kind of guide you through how to work with that feature. Quite hand-holdy sort of exercises. The idea being that everyone should be able to get through the exercises okay, and they can, like the JADE Developers course, be run instructor-led, or you can just work through them on your own. So yeah, each one covers a different feature and contains information about the feature and exercises as well. And the other thing to note about them is they are all standalone. So with the JADE Developers course, the base course, you'd go through it in order and you build a banking system, and you'd have to do the whole course kind of in order. With these supplementary topics, you don't need to do them in any particular order. We would recommend that you've already finished the JADE Developers course, but then you can cherry pick, I want to do one on REST, or I want to do one on WebSockets, or I want to do one on skins. It doesn't matter which order you do them or how many you pick and choose. So who are they for? So they're supplementary, which means we do expect that either you've done the JADE Developers course, or that you're at a similar sort of level where you already know at least the basics of JADE. So they're pitched kind of at the junior to intermediate level. You might distinguish them, for instance, from a white paper. So a white paper would be someone who's already reasonably familiar and just wants to get like quick information about a feature, whereas these JADE Developers course modules would be more like I want to really learn about the feature and build a bit of a prototype app that uses this feature. So all of them you'll create something, kind of like how you create the banking system in the JADE Developers course, but instead of creating a larger system, you just create a very small system that's standalone that lets you explore that particular feature that you're working on. Now, while they are for junior to intermediate sort of developers, so you're still reasonably new, they could also be useful for experienced developers, especially if you're looking at a new feature for the first time. So for instance, you might have been using JADE for a long time, but you've never touched WebSockets before. You're like, I have no idea what a WebSocket is. It might actually pay, you just grab the WebSockets course module, you can work through that one. You can probably work through it pretty quickly, and it will give you, as well as some information about WebSockets, you can actually build a little bit of a system where you can see the thing working and make sure everything connects okay. Now, that brings up, of course, the question of where can you grab them. So actually, this slide is now out of date. It says the topics will be released free of charge on the Learning Centre. I'm going to change that to these topics have been released free of charge on the Learning Centre. We got them, thanks to Chanel actually, we got them up even earlier than expected. So even right now, if you go to jadeworld.com/developercentre/learnjade, as well as having the base JADE Developers course there, we now have a nice big old table of all of the new course modules. Now with this, we've also got an extra sub-forum on the official JADE forums. You see down the bottom here, training and documentation. If you're, say you're working through a module and you're not quite sure about something, maybe you get stuck in some part of the exercise or some instruction isn't clear or something doesn't quite work for you, feel free to, chuck a question in there. So we'll be looking at that one. And the other thing you can do with this is, if you've got some really good ideas, I really would like to see a course module on this particular feature, could you write that one next? Really good place to put suggestions in there as well. The idea being that as we make new JADE releases and new features, we'll also add new supplementary topics, so that every time there's a new release, as well as having things like the TOI, you can also, there's a couple of new supplementary modules, I can learn about this new feature with this. Cool. Now, when will they be released? These topics will be released shortly before our next JADE Developers course. Actually, I'm lying. Sorry, I didn't update the slides. It was just actually, I think, yesterday afternoon that they went up on the website. So, I'm happy to announce that they're actually ready now. Wonderful. But I will also, just because this is really what I want to say, we do have another JADE Developers course on the 22nd of July. We're trying a bit of an experiment. So previously what we did with JADE Developers course is we'd take applications for it, and when we got enough people, we'd run one. We're moving to a kind of different system, giving this one a bit of a go. We're actually just going to schedule them ages in advance. So as well as 22nd of July, we've got one on late October. Idea being that you can start planning for that sort of thing, rather than wondering, I sign up for the JADE Developers course, I don't know when it's going to be. Now we're going to move towards, hey, there's a JADE Developers course coming up in 4 months. Maybe this is a good time to onboard a new developer because I know when I can send them to the course. So we will actually send out an email announcement as well, just in case, some other people will be interested who weren't at the TOI or anything like that, as well as the video of these presentations. So we're going to make an official announcement by email, but I can say that they are also up on the website now, which is really cool. As for what topics are there and how many, we've got 16 topics at the moment. Ideas, we're going to build this over time, so as new features are going to be added to the JADE product over the new releases, we're going to have corresponding supplementary topics be added. We don't necessarily have every single feature, we've got lots, but not necessarily every single one. So if there's a particular feature that you'd love to see a supplementary topic in, feel free to just chuck a request on the forum so we can get one made up. So you see the list of all of the topics there. WebSockets is a nice one because that's 2018 one. We've got some that are quite major, some things like the report writer or the JADE IDE modules are very large modules. And then you've got some that are very small, something like the testing one, unit testing. It's quite a small one, so they do vary quite a bit in size. We're not trying to prescribe a particular length to these topics. The idea being we're going to say as little or as much as we need to really cover that topic. Now, with that, we're about a quarter of an hour early before lunch, but we do have Ashley again for you, who's just going to have some closing remarks, and then we're going to feed you, which I'm looking forward to. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Tim. Does anyone have questions or anything they want to bring up for Tim before he exits? Okay.
Nice. Yep.
You go first, Kevin.
Just on the example schemas and topics, I think when it was first announced that the ATCG schemas would be shared, I also asked about the performance or load testing performance framework. Is that still something that will be shared or discussed as a topic?
So performance, we do not currently have a topic for that. That seems like a reason. By the way, are you talking about something to go up on GitHub, or are you talking about for a supplementary topic?
Both. There was an existing schema like the ATCG one, which was more for performance sort of testing, or doing it with the driver app for driving performance testing.
Oh, you mean to drive transactions and see about load and performance?
Yep.
We're still considering that one at the moment. There's a bit of work to do if we do that. So,
all right.
Yeah, made a commitment to that.
Cool, thank you.
Else?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Nice.
I noticed when you were demonstrating the Git browsing of version control, there's no shortcut key. Will they be getting one?
Yes, please. So I would like to say that, I think that's a really good idea. That personally, I love using shortcut keys for everything. There's quite a few parts in the product where lots of things will have shortcut keys, but not everything. Especially sometimes with the new features, because we're almost running out of key combos at this point. But definitely, I would love to see some shortcut keys. Probably a good idea, just to kind of make it a bit more formal. Chuck in a Jedi, and I'd definitely upload it.
And its own menu.
Sorry?
And its own menu.
Yeah, so it's all done by the drop-down menu. That is right.
Any other questions or comments?